Step number one of putting together a schedule is to set up the project. Okay, the first item is naming. Now we want to name it to a standard, and our SOP says that we want to say if we're doing a preliminary schedule, we're going to go ahead and say File, Save As, do it to the computer, Desktop, and we're just going to go ahead and establish this as the preliminary schedule, and then say this for the sample project, and then we'll go ahead and put the dates. So today we'll say it's 10/10/2017. Now notice I put dash marks, 2 digits, instead of putting slash marks, and the reason we didn't put slash marks is because it won't accept the slash marks. It'll only accept the dash marks. So we want to identify what type of schedule it is, the name of the project, and the date associated with it. So just go ahead and hit OK, save. And at that point we've named the file. Now, we can name it preliminary, proposed, for review, submitted for approval, the approved baseline, and then the schedule update. Those are the different items that we can consider naming our file as. So of course when we start, we're going to name it as a preliminary, and as we go through the sequence of getting it approved and updating it, we're going to change the name from preliminary to say submitted for approval to approved baseline, and then ultimately for a schedule update. Always associate a date with each of the schedules. The biggest mistakes most people make is that they save over an old file because they use the same naming structure. By putting the date in there, that kind of doesn't help 100% delete that issue, but it pretty much removes that issue from being an issue with naming structure and overwriting. So naming structure is the big one, and that's what step number one is all about. We also want to do some things in the next where we set up some options in the next step. But before we go there, I do want to talk about setting up some of the print preview functions. Since we're working in step one, setting up a project, we're just going to go ahead and say, okay, this is important for the future, where we set up a print, and then we go to print properties. And from print properties, we can go in and we can look at, okay, what kind of paper it's set up. We always want to be an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. Why do we want to be 11 by 17 paper? Is because that is how schedules are most likely they're looked at. You're able to do one wide by that. So that's one thing that we want to do. We can go to the advanced functions and look at the some of the options we're going to go through in the next slideshow, or next video, excuse me. So with that said, at this point for step number one, the big issue is just to just set up a naming structure. I also want to focus on the columns that you want to see. The I stands for the indicator information button. Task mode, we just want to go ahead and hide that. There's no reason to have the task mode showing there. It doesn't give us a lot of information, especially once we set up the options. We want to, of course, have the task name there. We want to have the duration, of course. It has start and finish here. Like, I want to have the early start and the early finish. I'd also want to have the late start and, of course, the late finish. We want to hide the columns that we don't want to be shown, like this one. The new columns, hide that one. The resource names, hide that one. Okay. We also probably want to put in the successor column. And we're going to add and hide some, hide some columns as we go through different steps of the schedule. If you have them out of sequence, like here, I like to move them. You can see it has a little like 4 arrow here. You can drag it and drop it over here, and you can move one column in front of the other. So we have early start, early finish, late start, late finish. We want to have total float, which also in the software is known as total slack. We want to have cost, because that's how we cost load a schedule, not cost one, just cost. Then we'd like to have percent complete, not the percent work complete, but the percent complete. They do two separate things. And then the last thing is we want to have the actual cost. Okay, the only thing I would add to this would be the actual starts, which we can do here. The actual start and the actual finish. And this is all key data that we're going to need throughout the schedule, putting the schedule together. Now I like to have the slack at the end, so I'm going to move it over, so I have the early start, early finish, late start, late finish, actual start, actual finish, and then total slack. So it's kind of what I would like to see. You can move this line back and forth. As you can see, this is how when you print it tells what columns to show and what columns not to show. But that's generally the columns that we like to see there. Task name all the way through successor. So that pretty much covers up setting up a project. We've established a naming structure for the different types of schedules that we're going to produce. We've identified the fact that we're going to put some options in there in the next step, and went ahead and laid out the columns that we're going to use. So that pretty much covers step number 1.